Hello, so I wanted to take this opportunity to go over all the markings on a track. It's something that I just kind of take for granted that I've known for many, many years, but it's also something that I have noticed a lot of people just aren't super familiar with and they just kind of ignore and don't worry about it, figure someone else knows what it means so they don't have to. But let's talk about it today. So maybe we can make this a little less confusing if it's something that's troubled you in the past. So let's start right here at the starting line, finish line area. Hopefully everybody knows that the start finish line is the big white straight line across the beginning of the track. It is different than the opposite end where it's the 200-meter mark because that'll have a staggered start and won't have a solid white line necessarily like this one here. And the curved line that branches off to the left here, that's just what you'll hear called a waterfall start, sometimes used for 1600 and 3200 races, maybe an 800 race as well. Basically, in a waterfall start, the distance runners will be lined up along this curved line instead, and they can basically cut in immediately after the gun fires, provided they don't cut anybody off. The solid white line is usually not used for a starting line unless you're going to run your 100-meter dash backwards going the other way. So the first thing I do if I'm trying to figure out a track, because the colors you'll notice are different on a lot of tracks on how they color their staggers. So the first thing if I'm trying to figure out, I start in lane 1, because I know lane 1 is, 400 meters around from lane 1. But as the lanes get out farther, they are bigger, so they are more than 400 meters. So you have to have a staggered start to make it even. So to figure out what those colors are, I go to lane 2. I see where the first stagger is in lane 2, and I see that is white, which means the one-turn stagger lines are going to be white. And some tracks, not all are. We're lucky here. Ours does say 800. Now, again, it's not super intuitive what that means. That basically means the 800-meter dash could start from this line because the 800-meter dash only runs in lanes for the first curve. Provided they didn't do a waterfall start, if they're doing a one-turn stagger, they will start at the white line in each lane. And I know that because that was the first stagger I see in lane 2. And then I move up and check out the next stagger where it says 400. So again, it seems odd where we get farther up and it's half the distance. What's going on here? So the yellow line on this track would be the 2-turn stagger. So it's twice as far up as the 1-turn stagger. And the 400 here means this is where the 400-meter dash would start because they're just going to stay in lanes the whole way around the track. Also, the 4x1, which is the 400-meter relay, would start at this same point. Then it's kind of hard to see here, but this says 4x400, which is a blue line on our track. And it's a 3-turn stagger because the first runner runs in their lane the entire way, and then the second runner runs the first curve in their lane as well. So 3 turns are ran in lanes. Basically, the first 500 meters are ran in lanes around the track. So you have to take a 3-turn stagger to balance everybody out. And then for us, a middle school race, some people have it in high school. And again, it's kind of hard to see here. It's a little bright. It says 4x2 on our track, a green line. So it's a 4-turn stagger. The 4x2 is 2 laps with the teams running in their lanes the entire way around. So just in lane 2, you have to move all the way up here to this 4-turn stagger mark. And we'll see here in a little bit how that looks when we look at lane 7, lane 8, how far up that puts you there. Now, jumping back over here to, this is before the finish line here. I want to kind of go over some markings here. So we'll get to the hurdles a little bit. The white dashes and the yellow dashes there are hurdle markings. I'll get to those later. The dotted blue line here is where you'll often see a row of blue triangles, or again, not always blue, often blue triangles here. When they painted our tracks, this is kind of a newer thing that the guy painting our tracks said that they're doing to avoid some of the confusion and having 2 sets of triangles, because we have another blue triangle up here in lane 2, and then we have our half blue, half green triangle in lane 1. Basically, it's to know where the second and third exchanges for the 4x4 is, and then all 3 exchanges in the 4x8 would be at this dotted line. Again, it's basically the beginning of the 4x8 exchange zone would be the easiest way to explain it. and it's a dotted line as opposed to triangles, just to avoid two blue triangles in the same lane. But you will see that on some tracks. We'll have a blue triangle here and then another blue triangle already up right here. This blue triangle in lane 1 is half and half because it's both. It's both the blue triangle for the 4x4 exchange, and it's also the green triangle for the second 4x2 exchange. So it's serving two purposes, so we put those triangles as two different colors. There again, you can see the triangle that's the beginning of the 4x4 exchange zone for the first exchange in the 4x4. So my second runner in lane 2 will be lined up on this blue triangle waiting for the baton, because then they're going to run that whole curve in lane 2 before they're able to cut in on the backside. And then you can also see a little green triangle here, and that's the 4x2 acceleration zone. So the 4x2 and 4x1 are allowed acceleration zones. The baton has to pass between the two bigger triangles, but the outgoing runner can start 10 meters before that just to have time to build up speed. But there is a marking of where they can line up legally. The flat end, the line end, is basically the line where they can be on the arrow side, but not at all past the line side of that when they're beginning their acceleration. There we see quickly here the beginning of the 4x4 first exchange in lane 3, and then also it's about again, because the stagger is different than in lane 2, this is the beginning of the 4x2 exchange. Ignore that blue dotted line from now. That's, again, I'll come back to that. So stuff starts to overlap here just because of coincidence in the spacing. So the triangle in lane 4 here, the beginning of the first exchange for second runner in the 4x4, just happens to coincide with the acceleration zone for the 4x2 exchange there. Let's go ahead and look at these dotted lines now. So basically, when you get to your hurdle races, there's two different ways you can do it. If you want to run the opposite direction to have the wind at your back, we don't have to worry about that much because we have an east-west track. We've never actually switched it around, but we did get it painted in case we did want to. So you can either use the same start-finish and just reverse which is which and have, your start becomes your finish line becomes your starting line. But then you're going to have different hurdle marks all down the way to make up the difference. So what we did instead, so we could use all the same blue hurdle marks for the boys 110s, we just put down a temporary is not the right word, but basically put down a alternative starting line, finish line. So this dotted blue line on our track where it says 110, and again, notice that's facing the opposite way. That's just the starting line for the 110 hurdles going the opposite direction as the default on our track would be. So we can use the same hurdle markings. And then same over here with this yellow 100 is basically serving the same purpose, where we can just use the same girls' hurdle marks, and there'll be another yellow line at the end. So our 100 meter is off, but it allows us to use the same hurdle markings. Now at the other end of the 4x4 exchange zone, we have another blue dotted line. Now again, not all tracks have this. Most actually may not. What you'll see is a row of blue triangles pointed the other way here. So this one's the beginning of the first exchange and looks like lane 6 or 7 there. And this line would be the end of the second and third exchanges, or all three 4x8 exchanges. So it's 10 meters past the start-finish line. And again, dotted lines just being used, I guess, more recently just to avoid confusion there. You can see all our staggers here. Let's take a little walk in lane 8 just to see how far. So this white line here is the one turn stagger. Remember, white, we use lane 2 as our key. White is a one turn stagger, but now this is 8 lanes worth. So lane 8 for the 800 would start out here at this white line because it's that much farther than lane 1. And we walk up ahead, we'll see the green triangle. That's the beginning acceleration zone for the second exchange in the 4x2. There's the end of the first exchange in the 4x4 blue triangle. There's the, again, 10 meters looks like more than 10 meters here on the with the GoPro wide lens here. So here's the beginning of that second exchange 4x2 zone. Ways up here. Yellow line, that was our 2-turn stagger. So the 400-meter dash, or the 4x1, would start out here. You can see in the other inside lanes there too, we're getting to the same things. Into the 4x2 zone. Blue line, so 4x4 start, 3-turn stagger in lane 8. And finally, we come to it out here, the lane 8 4-turn stagger for the 4x2 start. And look how far back we are from the finish line, or the starting line, start finish line. It's but again, on a 4-turn stagger on an 8-lane track, it's a ways up there. It's gotta balance out to be the same distance in the end. So let's take a walk here now near the start of the 300 hurdles. Basically, we're on the back stretch of the track. And we're just going to take a little tour here through lane 2. So the first marking we come up to, so that was we kind of already did the start finish area. Now let's get around the rest of the track. So here's lane 2. This is the yellow triangle for the first 4x1 exchange. And it's going to be about 10 meters before the start of where the actual exchange has to take place. So we run up here. You can see the staggered markings and all the other lanes. Because again, the 4x1 is going to have a 2-turn stagger. But at this point, that first stagger is almost already kind of made up because we're at the end of this first curve. So there's really only one stagger to go. And you'll see these solid white lines here. So these are the start of the 300-meter hurdles. So they're staggered about the same 1-turn stagger as the 800-meter start is. And again, on our track, not all tracks, but it is marked here. So this is on the beginning of the backstretch. You can see it says 300, and that'll be the start of the 300 hurdles. And also, it's the center point of the 4x1 exchange zone. So the yellow triangles marking the 4x1 exchange will be equidistant, or like this line would be the center of that zone, just if you're looking for an indicator there. And then the dotted white line, you will see on most tracks, that's just the brake line, and it's in a weird spot because it's not indicative of any distance. It's just based on the shape of your track and where your track goes from curve to straight. So basically the dotted line, the brake line as it's called, is the point at which you are now on the straightaway and no longer on the curve. So if you're running a 1-turn stagger race like the 800, the start is on the white line at the starting line. This dotted line is the point where you can cut in. Cutting in before this can result in should result in disqualification because you've, in theory, cut off distance that you still needed to make up on the stagger. So you see all our markings here for all the different, the stagger for the 300 hurdles, and the yellow triangles now pointing toward me. Here are going to be the ends of the first 4x1 exchange. And here we come to the first 300 hurdle markings. So this is where the first 300 hurdle would go. We don't have our track marked for 400-meter hurdles. Sometimes you'll see those on that first curve, maybe in a different color, maybe in the same color. I've seen them in black before. And again, on the home stretch, it's kind of hard to tell. If you're really, well, you can tell there's just fewer 300 hurdles on the home stretch, obviously, but you'll also know your 300 hurdle mark color. It's going to match whatever's on the back stretch for you there. And you can see the stagger because those are still all 1-turn staggered apart. So here we come to our second 300 hurdle, and we also now are getting to the acceleration triangles for the second 4x1 exchange, and also the first 4x2 exchange, and that's where this curve kind of gets confusing. And if you're working flags at the first 4x2 exchange, it's a really, really wide zone because you only have one of those 4-turn stagger made up. So the split triangle there, because it's both a 4x1 and a 4x2 exchange. Split triangle, you can see how far the stagger is. I'm just now at the about 10-meter difference between lane 1 and lane 2 there. I get the green triangle for the acceleration zone for 4x2, as I'm just then getting a little bit later to the beginning of lane 2's 4x1 second exchange. And then also what we're going to hit, just like we had at the 300 start, is the white line here, which is the start of the 200-meter dash, as marked here on our track. Again, not all tracks, but that same thing. That's going to be the center mark for the second 4x1 exchange zone, and also the start of the 200-meter dash. And because it's a one curve race, it's that same distance as we saw for the 800 that only runs one curve in lanes from the starting line. Again, here we get to the end of the 4x1/4x2 zone with the split color, and we see our third 300-meter hurdle mark. And again, the triangles here just get way spread out. You can see our green zones are going well past our 4x1 exchange zones, just because, again, there's still 2.5 more staggers to make up, or more turns to make up. And our fourth 300 hurdle marking. Then we hit our acceleration triangle for our final 4x1 exchange and our fifth 300 hurdle marking. Now here we get into a little more markings here, and it can be kind of confusing, but I feel like this one everyone kind of has a pretty good idea what it means. So we're hitting now again, you can see our stagger starts to even up. We're just entering the end of this final curve. So that's all the stagger that remains for this 4x1 final exchange curve here at the beginning of the zone with those triangles. Now obviously now the dotted lines here, again, this is a little confusing here. So there's a lot of markings on the track right here. So obviously the solid white lines are just where the curve of the entire oval continue around through the curve here. And then specifically the problem becomes the boys 110 hurdles that will start at this solid white line here. And that does extend out past the curvature of the track, and you got to put blocks down. So you kind of have, and then of course it becomes a staging area too. So the dotted white lines are the straightaway extended, and then the solid white lines are the curve continuing around. And you will see, especially at the youth level, kids will, start in the dots and follow the curves and end up in different lanes. So it can definitely cause confusion there. Now the blue line here on our track is, like I was saying before, that's just going to be the alternative finish line. So we have the 110 start with the white line is the default one facing the right way, and then the kind of one that's upside down there is for the finish line starting from the other direction. And we'll kind of follow along in lane 8 here, and you can see where the dotted lines start to merge with the solid lines, and then we have the 100-meter dash starting line, which is white, the backwards yellow one, which again we never use, but if we did run backwards, that would be the end of the girls' 100-meter hurdles. And then there's the first boys 110 hurdle. Again, boys and girls 110, boys 110 and girls 100s have the same number of hurdles. It's just a spacing thing. Just the boys would run them over if they were spaced as tight as the girls' hurdles are. So it's just giving them an extra 10 meters to spread the hurdles out a little more. Here we get to the end of the exchange zone, and all the lanes are even now. The stagger is done. So now what's neat is from this point on, the lanes are basically identical. There's no stagger anymore. So the end of this final 4x1 exchange zone is now a row of triangles. Hurdle markings. So there's the first girls hurdle, the second boys hurdle, again blue and yellow. And then if we see another white, it'll be our next our next 300 hurdle right here. There's our 300 hurdle, girls, boys. And let's kind of drift in here so you can see they're all the same. Girls, boys, girls, boys, girls, boys, and it looks like I think that's our No, it's not the last. That's our 7th 300 hurdle. Yellow is the girls, blue is the boys. Girls, boys, girls, boys, girls, boys. And then you got girls. And then it just so happens that our last 400-meter hurdle is right on that dotted line, 10 meters from the finish line. And there we go. We made it all the way around the track. There you go, 400 meters all the way around. I think we hit about everything there. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and we'll check you later.